really good to see everyone here. I'm super excited to be sharing this information with you guys today. So we're going to be talking about youth activism and community organization. I know a lot of you guys here have probably done some work within your community, or you want to do some work within your community, and you maybe want to be able to amplify the work that you're doing, or you want to actually get an understanding of how to even start. So I'm happy to be able to provide you guys with a lot of information that I hope will be helpful within all of your endeavors within your community and I mean the world at large, because I know a lot of you guys are probably taking on these super huge issues that we'll be discussing a little bit more about as I move forward. So to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Kyle Lambert. I currently live in Queens, New York City. I was born and raised in Jamaica, however. I moved here 3 years ago. Um, yeah, so I'll be going to Stanford this fall, and I just graduated from the George Washington Carver High School for the Sciences, and I'll be studying neurobiology and global health at Stanford. So my work has really been focused around health equity, which ties into my minor, as you guys just heard. I've been focused on working within underserved communities here in Queens, as well as the world at large, and more specifically, my communities in Jamaica. With that being said, I've been doing work within elderly homes, nursing areas, different medical facilities that may house low income, not just students and people, but like maybe it's elderly children, and it really varies. I've also been doing a lot of work within mental health. I am a mental health first aid trainer as well, so I do hold workshops for that. Outside of that, I've also been working for the New York City Department of Education for the past 2 years, where I've been of course, working within educational inequalities within New York City and trying to close a few of those gaps, specifically within science and math. So with a lot of that work, I've been utilizing these tools to do a lot of projects. And that's just like that's the focus of my work. I do participate in a lot of other projects that, range from different things like environmental justice and stuff like that. I'm usually trying to participate and getting involved. So yeah, I hope to be able to provide you the wide range of information so that you're not you're not limiting yourself, but you're able to step inside of different realms that you've wanted to explore if you've never even thought of exploring. So to go over a little bit about the agenda, we're going to start talking about youth responsibility, what that means, what I think that means, especially in the context of 2020. Then we'll get into pillars of community organization. That should be the meat of the discussion and everything. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit more about the nitty-gritty aspect of community organization and how to really go about that. Then we'll talk about Youth Organizers Connect, which of course, as it says, really talking about like networking and having conversations with other organizers. And then I will talk a little bit about the guidebook, which is currently inside the chat. You guys don't have to click on that now. I'd recommend you just click it at the end, because it's after you get all the information and stuff, it will be extremely helpful. And then we have like a question segment, so you guys can ask me questions. We could discuss different aspects of the presentation. Yeah, so we'll just get started. To everyone who's just joining in, welcome, welcome. My name is Kyle, and we are just about to start with youth responsibility and get into the presentation. So I mean, our fight, right? What are we really up against? This is a quote I saw on Instagram a few weeks ago, and it said, "You're personally responsible for becoming more ethical than the society you grew up in." And that really resonated with me for a few reasons. One, 2020, I mean, with the context of 2020, we know that there's a lot of things that people are definitely, raising their voices at and fighting against. But it's important to realize that these things are not just new issues that just arise in 2020 because, it's just that horrible of a year. And that's something we'll talk a little bit more about. But these are things that existed before. They existed with generations before. So, yeah, I mean, and to list out a little bit of that, a lot of you guys may be working with some of these issues, or you may want to work with some of these issues, and you'll see them outlined on the guidebook as well, so that you guys may start to think about different things that you may want to pursue within your projects. So like police brutality, with more than 1,000 unarmed people dying at the hands of police in the United States since 2013. Educational inequalities, which is something I just talked about, with the graduation rate of Black students being 14% less than that of white students. Health inequities, which is, as I said, the focus of what I've been doing since I've been here in the United States. With a single minority group holding 13% of the US population, making up nearly half of all new HIV infections in the United States. Voter suppression. This is something a lot of people have been talking about lately, especially given the upcoming election. With strict voter ID laws in a country where most people without those documents and that the ability to get those IDs are people of color. Climate crisis. With the average global temperature rising about 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit within this past century, and immigration injustices, children being held literally in cages for seeking freedom and the ability to live. So these are a few of the issues. This is not even half of certain things that I've seen a lot of organizers, a lot of activists working on or wanting to work on. But how do we get into these huge issues with the resources that we have and the skills that we have? So as I said, guess what? These issues existed before our calls to action. They didn't just appear in 2020 at all. And they've pretty much been there for quite some time. So I mentioned roots a little bit earlier. So these are the driving forces that allow these problems to persist, right? Think of a tree. When the tree isn't just standing by itself, the roots underground, that's what's really keeping it, is really keeping it alive and standing. And those roots of these issues are really what allow them to continue in our communities. And a successful organizer will focus on this fact. So I want this to be one of the most important things that you try to keep in mind as I go through the presentation and you start reading the guidebook at the end of it. So think about your ability to create more impactful change by digging deeper and questioning beyond that superficial level. Start questioning to get to those roots. So a few of those questions, which you'll also see on the guidebook, and as I said, you want to definitely be thinking about the roots as you answer these questions in the guidebook. So questions you need to answer: who or what is being affected by whatever issue it is that you're thinking of, whatever issue it is that might have affected you or someone you may know, or a community that you may care about. Who or what is being affected? And then you want to look at what structures, cultures, practices, and policies institutionalize this problem. This part is where you start looking into the roots, because usually these issues, not even usually, for pretty much every single one of them, these issues are upheld by certain structures, by certain cultures, by certain practices. And in order for you to look at a huge problem and say, this is something I want to take down, this is something I want to take out of my community, you have to be able to look into these questions and start actually asking yourself, what are the structures? Because as I was just discussing with someone, the first person who joined the workshop, in order for you to start looking at something, you have to recognize it. You can't start working on something, you can't stop looking for a specific change without actually recognizing what you want to change. And that recognition has to come with the roots. It can't just be on a superficial level. It can't just be what you see with your naked eye. You actually have to look into those structures. You actually have to look into those practices. So you also want to look into historical, economic, and social causes. And looking at these basically will assist your root-based projects, because at the end of the day, of course, those structures, those practices, those policies that we just said you have to really focus on, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were influenced by history. They were influenced by the economy. They were influenced by how by certain social aspects of our communities. And then you want to ask yourself the personal questions. These two questions, I highlighted them in blue because they're a bit different from the other three. These are the more personal ones that you have to ask yourself. How willing are you to devote your time and energy into root change? The reason why this is so important is because when we look at an issue and we start talking about wanting to work on that issue, we might look, as I said, on that superficial level, and then once we realize that our project isn't going out how we wanted it to go, or it's not creating that change that we wanted to see, we start doubting ourselves. We start looking at ourselves as, did I just waste all this time trying to do this? Before you even begin, ask yourself this question so that as you're continuing, you're able to say, yes, I'm focusing on the root, so I know that at the end of the day, this change will not be a temporary movement. It will not just be a superficial movement that someone can just pull under the rug at the next day. And then you also want to look at, am I working on a Band-Aid solution? Band-Aid solution referring to a solution, as I said, that's just at the top level. It doesn't focus on the roots. It doesn't go anything less than the branches of the tree. It's only focusing on those leaves, those branches. It's not going deep enough. So asking yourself those personal questions as you work on your projects, as you go through the guidebook, will allow you to create better answers for yourself, so you can create a more impactful project. And these questions, they do come up on the guidebook as well. So expect to be working while you're working to be answering these questions as well. So global family, caring for others. A few points that I want you guys to think about. One, you don't have to identify with a specific community to work with an issue that's related to that specific community. As I have here, for example, you don't have to be Muslim to fight against Islamophobia written laws, nor do you have to be Black to stand up against anti-Blackness. And it's important, though, this part is really important as well. It's important to know your place in that fight and ensure that you're not appropriating struggle. A lot of times when we are working as allies in for certain issues and supporting certain communities, a lot of times we may tend to not only just compare struggle, but try to associate it with our lives in some sense. And if you're working with a specific community, if you're working for the betterment of a specific community, you want to ensure that the focus is on them and not just your experiences. So definitely ensure that you're not appropriating struggle in any way with that. And that's especially important as it comes on to now when we're fighting against anti-Blackness, and a lot of allies are working with that. So this third part, this is something that I will get a little bit more into as we get into Youth Organizers Connect. There is power in numbers. You want to be there for the person who you don't even know exists. And when we talk about activism, when we talk about community, one thing that we like to focus on is the idea of collectivism and the idea of me being here for you, you being here for me. And it's not just an individual mindset. It's not just, this is going to impact me in this way, so this is why I'm doing it. So adopt that mentality, and it will allow you to start looking at different projects that will create better impact, and that's not just for yourself. Because at the end of the day, if we're looking for a better world, if everyone is focusing on each other and not just ourselves, that's how we'll be able to start looking at those bigger issues that I outlined at the start of this presentation. So we're just going to get into the pillars of community organization. I want to leave about 15 minutes so we could discuss. So I'm trying to get through this. So for pillars of community organization, you want to be able to listen from several angles. This is an important aspect of the guidebook that you'll actually be, that's currently inside the chat. But as I said, just click at it at the end when we're done with the presentation. For listening at several angles, one, obviously, you want to speak with people affected by the issue you're working on. Whether that's people in your community or that's something you go through as well, you want those different perspectives. You want to inquire. You want to find out how they're being affected by the issue. There's so much importance in having different perspectives on something, because at the end of the day, as I said, global communities, global issues, you're not the only person going through that specific issue, or the one friend you may have spoken to is not the only person going through that issue. So what happens is, when you're able to get those perspectives for several different people, you'll be able to look at a wider range of possibilities for your projects, a wider range of things that you may be able to do with your resources, and you're not stuck in this bubble of I don't know what to do because this issue is above me. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit now. You want to approach it with an open mind. Whatever issue you look at and you're saying, okay, this is something that's important to me. How do I get into this? How do I start working on a project with this? Oftentimes we start working on those projects focused on an extremely specific aspect of the issue we want to fix, right? And without exploring the diversity of real life experiences, we get stuck in that bubble. We get stuck in that place of, okay, this is one idea that I have to work on, the issue of police brutality. But then when I start thinking, I'm like, okay, this one project that I'm thinking of right now is a little bit out of reach. The current resources that I hold will not enable me to pursue this project. We start doubting ourselves. We start going against our mindset at the initial state of it, and we'll start saying, okay, well, I guess I'll have to move on. This isn't for me. But then allowing yourself the opportunity to have several different perspectives, several different options, will allow you a greater chance of creating the most impactful project as possible. And that's something, as I said, utilizing the guidebook, you want to be able to try to focus on approaching with an open mind. And the guidebook does outline that for you. So it kind of just allows you to flow with that open mindset, as I just talked about. So you're approaching with that open mind, and now you want to start evaluating your options, right? Brainstorming options for these change-making projects will be easier because of your open mind approach, right? You want to see where your skills would allow the greatest change. And as I said at the start of this, you want to still think back to roots. You want to still think back to, am I working on a Band-Aid solution? If you realize you're working on a Band-Aid solution, go back to the drawing board, open your mind a little bit more, try to think about, try to speak to other people, try to utilize the diversity of real life experiences, as we just talked about, to create more options for yourself. So to get into the nitty gritty of all of this, but actually before that, this part's super important. You have to recognize that you are human. None of us, I mean, a lot of times we look on Instagram, we look on TikTok, we see these organizers and activists doing a lot of work. And sometimes we're like, okay, wow, how is this even possible? It's like, do these people even take a break for themselves? But at the end of the day, any of these projects will take a toll on your emotional health, even if it's something that you personally don't necessarily identify with, which is something we were just talking about. And that, I mean, as I said, there's a thin line between that and appropriating struggle. However, when you're working towards bettering a specific community, of course, it can definitely take a toll on your emotional health. So it's important to be able to, one, reject perfection. Now, this is something it took me a while to recognize this, that it's so important for us to recognize that circumstances won't always be perfect, right? It won't always be perfect for that specific part of the issue that you wanted to work on. And that's why it's so important to approach with an open mind. It's so important to utilize those diverse perspectives to create options that are wide range, that are looking at several different angles and not just the one perspective that you had in the first aspect of things. And as I said, you'll get a more practical aspect of that as you go through the guidebook. It's really important that we recognize that perfection is really just a capitalist idea that we just don't want to work towards. That is a damaging idea that will cause you to start looking at yourself as a failure. You'll start looking at yourself as a person who's unable to create change, and that's really not true. You want to be able to prioritize your health, recognize your emotional limits. As I said, these projects can definitely take a toll on your mental health. So you want to be able to find resources that suit your needs. Here, I have my organization, Med4All Global, which I mentioned in the first part of the presentation. I do have a Get Help page here, which does provide a few resources to enable your maintenance of mental health. But then as well, the guidebook does have a space for that, because just as much as it's important to brainstorm, it's important to organize your ideas regarding mental health, how you're going to actually ensure that you're taking care of your emotional health. So I did include that in the guidebook as well, so that you have a space to put your ideas down that are outside of just the project itself. Um, Moving forward into the nitty gritty, as I said, now that we've covered that important aspect of organization and caring for yourself, you want to be able to pinpoint your goals. Uh, separate your sub goals from your goals. This will help to reduce the feeling of confusion and, this is too big for me. This project, this issue, this whole community problem is just too big for me to work on. So what exactly are sub goals? These are the things like getting 100 people to sign a petition over a weekend, or creating content that will increase engagement, right? Those are the things you want to separate from the big laws that you want passed, or the local statistics you want to change. Without separating those sub goals, it will sometimes seem so impossible to achieve your goals. Because when you identify that big goal and then you're like, okay, you're just gonna get up and say, I'm gonna work towards this goal, and I'm gonna try to plan working towards this goal. You're gonna get confused at some point in time, because the issue will start looking a lot bigger than you. But when you take it one step at a time and you separate those sub goals, you don't push them all in one like notepad, which is something I started to do when I just came here and I was working on issues that were important to me. I would just throw all those goals in like a note section and write it down in like a journal without separating them. So you'll have a section on the guidebook as well to start separating your goals and your sub goals. You have several sections for that actually. Now we're going to talk about strategizing and action planning and creating a blueprint of actions that will execute those goals and sub goals that you've pinpointed. So just to point out a few things that several organizers may utilize within their sub goals and their action planning. This will also be provided on the guidebook. So just to give you a few ideas. So a lot of people might hold rallies, peer-to-peer messaging. This is something I'm trying to start getting involved with using a lot more, because they really, really work. When you have that personal connection to someone, you could say, hey, I'm working on this and that, and I would really appreciate if you could sign and donate and send this to 3 friends. Now, one thing I want you to notice with this message, and you could probably write this down somewhere, you didn't ask them if they could send it to 3 friends. You didn't say, hey, could you send this to 3 friends, or can you send this to 3 friends? The wording is important in a sense. Not that you're tricking your friends into sending it, of course, to 3 other people, but when you have that level of confidence and you're saying, I would really appreciate if you could sign this and send it to 3 friends, they're a lot more likely to do it. So that's one tactic that I'm utilizing right now with a few of the products that I'm working on. To move on, infographics, that's something that is highly used right now. Of course, a lot of people are utilizing education as a means to understand and to bring awareness to certain things. So it's important this is a discussion we had in a group chat that I created, and I'll be talking about in a little bit. Aesthetic should not be the focus of your infographics. It really should be the information. It should be the content. And that's both from a person who's being educated perspective and from the person who's creating the education. Because at the end of the day, if you're only reading things that look good, you will miss a lot of valuable information. And that's something that's important for us as organizers, as activists, to bring to the forefront and get people to understand that there's so much information that you need to be focusing on, and not just how the presentation or the few Instagram posts look. Moving forward, emailing allies and potential amplifiers. If you see someone on Instagram with like 8,000 followers and you see them doing a lot of work within activism and organization, do not be afraid to reach out to them, email them, DM them, and say, hey, I'm working on this. I would really appreciate if you could post this on your story, or you could mention this to a few of the communities that you're a part of. Things like that definitely work, because I mean, a lot of times I think we look at other people and we might say, they probably don't want to do that. But if that person has been doing a lot of organization and activism themselves, they're a lot more likely to definitely post it for you, or reach out to other people and get the word out. So that's one idea you really should implement in whatever projects you're working on throughout the guidebook. Workshops, that's something I'm looking into as well. I plan to actually have a health equity workshop under my organization, Med4All Global, within the next month, focused on health equity, hopefully with 2 Stanford professors. I'm still trying to figure that out. Interacting with lawmakers, something that's also a pretty common right now within the past few months. You're visiting local websites, you're getting the contact information for the local congressmen, the senators, the whoever it is, whoever is working within the government agencies that look over your community or state or country. Be able to interact with them and say, this is something that's important to me and my community or someone else's community, and blah, 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 blah. Moving on, storytelling is also important. I was working with another organization that was doing storytelling, like bringing other people's stories to the forefront, which was really working for them. Donation through education. Let's say you can teach a class, a virtual class, and you charge everyone who comes in $1, or at least a minimum of like $2 or something like that, however much they want to pay as a donation to whatever specific cause you may be working with. That's an excellent idea that a lot of people are using right now. As I said, all of these will be on the guidebook for you, so you could pull at them when you're working on your sub goals. Because I don't know if I stress that yet, but with all of these strategizing and action planning and these ideas here, these are things that should be incorporated in your sub goals, not your goals. Your big goal is something like, as I said, like, you want a specific policy change within your community. So in order for you to get there, the sub goals could utilize these effective means. Public hearings, of course, phone banks, bingo card donations, which is something I did do for my organization a few days ago. It's like posting a bingo card on, let's say, Instagram or Snapchat or whatever social media you use. And then for each person that donates a specific amount that's checked off on the bingo card, you like put a check on it, and then you'd probably like tag them on Instagram or something to that effect. I utilized that to actually raise money for gloves for underserved facilities within, I think it was June or May. Strikes and marches, of course, one of the most common ones. So those are 12. Those are 12 extremely, extremely effective ideas that you want to pull on for your sub goals. And they will be on the guidebook, as I said, so you could still look at them at the end of the day. And I'm also recording this, so I will provide a means by which you could reach back at this video if you want to listen again or watch something over. So we're looking at the blueprint now. As I said, so the first thing is you want to actually just map it out. You'll have space to map it out on the guidebook. So for the first aspect being establishing your goal, you want to start here because that's the big change you want to see. And establishing this will allow you to better organize your sub goals. It will allow you to see which sub goals would work best, which aspects of the previous slides would work best with your sub goals. So specificity is your best friend. It's so crucial that you write time and dates, directly state what you want done within your sub goals, or most of the time you won't get it done. When you start actually organizing that specific aspect of things, the time, the dates, these specifics, that's how you will actually start committing yourself. Use Google Calendar, use a, what do you call it? Planner, write all of those things down, be able to keep yourself accountable for all of that. Team and resources would be the next step. You want to, of course, remember you're human. Please distribute your task among peers or other people who care about this issue, because you can't handle everything on your own. As I said, you have to make sure that you're maintaining your best, health. And you want to document all the things that you may need to carry out the sub goals, the resources that you may need, whether that's literally simple things like Wi-Fi, write it down. Then you want to follow your plan. It's normal to have to change the specifics of your sub goals like dates, but you want to be able to communicate with your team. And also, because you were so specific with your sub goals, it'll be so much easier for you to be able to change it, and the execution will still run smoothly. It won't be all over the place. as if it would be if there wasn't like a set time or date, but and you were just running around telling, you know, certain team members to do this and certain team members to do that. Having that organization, have a group chat, create something on GroupMe on Instagram, and, you know, ensure that you are being very specific with that aspect of the planning. So we're getting towards the end of this part, so we can get into a little bit of discussion, any questions you guys may have. For Youth Organizers Connect, as you guys can see inside the group chat, I have linked inside the chat, the Zoom chat, I should say, sorry. I created a GroupMe support chat for youth organizers and activists. Right now, we have a little bit over 92 members since I screenshot this and put it here. We are utilizing, this group chat has been really good so far, and it's only been existent for like a week or two. We've been having different conversations about different projects that other people are working on. Literally just asking simple questions, like asking about like how we feel about aesthetics, which is how I was able to implement that within this presentation here. So it's such an important place for you guys to join, have that connection, and start you know, having those conversations with other activists, with other organizers, to best enable, you know, your ability to really create massive change and not just be influenced by what you know in yourself, you know, and what other people may know will really, really, really help. So in using your guidebook, the link to the guidebook is now in the chat as well. So as you see here, it's 15 pages. It isn't too long, and it really should be like a power tool to keep your organization in check. It does address the key parts of organizing that are often overlooked, including the mental health aspect, which I definitely did put there, and a lot of space for planning future projects. I explained how to utilize it, and then I left a lot of space at the end with certain boxed out spaces so that you're able to organize and all of that good stuff. So yeah, definitely thank you guys so much for listening to that. I hope it really wasn't too long. And I hope it was helpful and you're able to utilize the guidebook to put all of those things into practice and really create some amazing projects, as I know you guys will. I definitely want you guys to reach out to me if you feel comfortable. I did include a lot of my information on the guidebook.